I've got a perfect job. I've got a big, beautiful house on a lake. I've got this beautiful family. I had it all, right? And I was so miserable.
The world is obsessed with fast-track success. It's easy to think that people become successful overnight. But let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Katy McFee is passionate about empowering women and helping to close the gender gap in senior leadership. As the founder and principal at Insights to Action Coaching and Consulting, she works with women to break through to executive leadership and become the successful and impactful executives they desire. Prior to this, Katy spent 18 years working in sales and leadership, holding senior leadership positions in sales within the SaaS and tech space. After becoming a successful executive herself, Katy saw that, like her, many others struggle with the transition to senior leadership, and there are very few resources to help. She left her corporate role to launch Insights to Action with the mission of helping other women make the successful leap into senior leadership and to show up as the leaders they want to be, all without burning out. I've been tracking you for a bit on LinkedIn, and you're so interesting, and I feel like you probably have a really great story. I think everyone is a really great story, right? But we
Everyone does.
gloss over it, and
Yeah.
you have not been so glossy, which I really appreciate. So I'm excited to bring that to service.
I am a big believer in sharing that, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because
Cool.
I totally agree with you. We just see the good. I was just talking to someone about this literally before this call,
Mm.
whereas, yeah, everything looks great on social media, but not reality.
You, as an older teen, approaching adulthood, what did you envision for yourself?
That's an interesting question because I figured I would probably go to university.
Mm.
I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was not a studious high school student. I was generally pretty smart, so I did relatively well, but I did not have good study habits. I liked to skip school. It was not the person you see now. You'd be like, wow, no one saw that coming. So I hadn't really given a lot of thought to what my future was. And the thought I had given, I just had no clue. I was lost.
Mm.
And the high school I went to didn't do any of those types of skills assessments that tell you, hey, you should be a doctor, you should be a teacher. So I was really going in blind. When I finished high school, I applied to 3 different programs because I liked science and I was good at it. I applied to chemical engineering, chemistry, and I think biochemistry. I didn't know what any of them were. I still don't really understand what chemical engineering is. And I ended up starting in chemistry, but then I ended up dropping out. So the short answer to your question is I had no clue. And it took me a little while to figure that out.
What made you decide to drop out of that major?
I was just really lost at that point in my life. And I didn't know what the end game was. I wasn't sure what I was working towards. So I dropped out after 1 semester and I went home and told my parents, university is not for me. And then I proceeded to waitress and bartend, 2 jobs for the next 8 months before I realized that maybe university was for me. And I didn't know if I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. So I think it was just a lack of direction.
Yeah.
I was enjoying bartending. I was enjoying that stage in my life. And in retrospect, I wasn't feeling probably aligned with what I was doing academically.
What did you end up graduating with?
So I ended up graduating with a degree in biopharmaceutical science, where I did a genomics option. So really specifically in the field of genetics, although that was my 3rd program. So I did a semester of chemistry. Then I did a year of nutrition because nutrition and health is something that's always interested me. So I went away to school for that 1 year. But then I looked at my professors and the people in that field, and I thought, I don't think I really want to do that when I graduate. So then I switched again. So the 3rd time what I did is I looked at all the different courses that I really enjoyed as part of my program and tried to line those up with a major. And maybe I would stick with. And so finally, the third time was a charm. I loved my program. I found it was really, really interesting and cutting edge. But I did feel a little bit like a failure at that point in my life because all of my friends were graduating 2 years ahead of me because I messed around and tried to figure out what I wanted to do for 2 years. So by the time I graduated, my friends were either in their career for a couple of years. Some people were graduating with master's degrees by that point.
What did you think you were going to do with that major upon graduation?
I still had no idea. It was interesting because most of the people in that program used it as a pre-med program. I very briefly considered medical school. However, I already felt so behind. I was like, I'm not doing 12 more years of school or whatever. I liked talking about my research. I did not like doing the research. And so I was thinking pharma sales was going to be the route that I was going to take. I did not end up doing that. I ended up going into biotech sales, which many people think is the same thing. It was different. So I was more on, again, genetics, genetic testing, diagnostics, research technologies, that type of thing. So I ended up stumbling into that. But really, even before I got that job, I was applying for all kinds of things that
like
were,
finger to the wind, whatever sticks, right?
I'm like, who wants to hire me? I'm yours.
Did you struggle to find a job post-college?
I must have applied for hundreds of jobs. Like I made it my full-time job to apply for jobs. So every day I would apply for jobs all day long. Luckily, I also was networking a lot. No one told me to do this, but I somehow intuitively knew. And so I was bartending. And I remember a guy that I had worked with in the past came and sat down at the bar and I hadn't seen him. And I knew his wife was a pharma rep. And so I was like, hey, you think your wife would let me take her out for coffee? And he was like, yeah, I guess so.
Wow. Sales is what you were ready for.
Yeah. I was clearly meant to do sales, but I did not have enough
You didn't
self-awareness.
know though.
Yeah. I was really like whining and dining strangers to get them to pass my resume on. I remember I got an interview with a pharma company and I was really excited and I didn't get the job and I started crying on the phone. A friend of mine ended up getting a job at a local startup and mentioned it to me. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting. She ended up getting me an interview and then I ended up getting that job, DNA Genotech. Once I was in it, I immediately loved it. I loved getting an opportunity to talk to really interesting customers and talk about our technology. So it was really the right thing, but it was not a straight path to figuring that out.
Once you got into the workforce from school, what struggles did you have with that transition?
My initial transition to the workforce was relatively easy. Once I finally got a job, getting the job was hard. Transitioning to working, I loved it. I did really well in those first few years at that company. And then I would say one of the biggest struggles for me in my career was getting to leadership, proving I should be there. Like all of that stuff was a little harder for me. Whereas I would say sales came relatively easy for me, like in my wheelhouse, is my natural state. Don't get me wrong, there's some bumps still along the way. Like the second job I ended up taking, I thought it was one thing. It ended up being something else. And I just wasn't happy there. And so I ended up moving to another company, which I loved their technology. I loved what they did. I was so passionate about working for this company. It was a dream job. And then it turned out that the culture really was not for me. It was toxic and I didn't have a manager who supported me. And so I ended up in this dream job, but feeling pretty miserable. And so again, I was feeling a little disillusioned. I was like, I thought this was for me. I was so great at the beginning. And now do I suck all of a sudden or what's going on? And so part of it again was like, at that point in my career, I hadn't really mapped out what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a VP eventually because I looked at my very first boss when I started there and I was like, I want to be you when I grow up. And it was funny because he's 6'3" rugby playing alpha male. Like, I'm probably never going to be him.
Let's dissect what was it about him, the VP role, that was exciting to you? Was it the stature or was it being able to manage others? Just feeling like you had checked the box because you got to the seniority? What were those feelings you were having?
At that time, at that early stage of my career, it was more around thinking this guy was really cool. He was very charismatic. Like we all loved working for him and our job was really fun.
Mm.
And I thought, man, this would be awesome to just do this and get to be the boss
Yeah.
and have
And the
everyone love working for
naivety of
me.
it, right?
Yes.
At that
Yes.
point, you were thinking more money, more problems, and all the things.
Oh, I don't think I understood what it even meant to be a VP at that point.
Of course.
I was just like, that sounds good. I want that cool title. I didn't really, going into that job, I didn't even really understand how a corporate structure worked. Actually, I'll share this with you off topic, but like so I didn't understand, like I said, how corporate structure worked. I'd never really learned that. I hadn't done business. I had done science.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with my boss in his office one day and he was explaining to me, because I was like, tell me about the C level. It was like really didn't know a lot. And he was explaining our corporate structure. So he was saying like there's a CEO. So like, for example, Ian is a CEO and then there's the VP. And I was like, wait. Ian's the CEO? I thought he was the IT guy. Because our CEO was wonderful, so
Oh,
approachable,
that's cool.
and came from a tech background, and we were a startup. So he was always helping us to figure the things out. Like he helped me get my setup done. And all these images were flashing in my mind at that point, of going to his door, being like, knock, knock, knock. Ian, my phone's not working.
That is amazing.
He's the CEO of the company.
Oh.
I was so mortified.
It sounds like that's the culture that Ian wanted to foster. So that's fantastic.
You know what? So much to my dismay, my boss shared this little anecdote with him. And, but he wasn't even offended. He was actually like, oh, I'm glad I'm so approachable.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Fear of rejection in sales. Did that show up for you?
In that early stage, not really. When I first started, we didn't really have a quota. We have a team quota.
Mm.
Again, it was so early. They couldn't even really create quotas for individuals. I came in and like I said, I did well pretty early, but by the time I was there for a year, I was doing very well on the team. I was leading the team in terms of revenue generation. So I felt good, right? I was like, I'm not competitive as long as I'm doing the best. So it's one of those things, like, I think I am a person, I've realized over time, that ties a lot of my self-worth to my accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always very motivated to work really hard and do what I needed to do to succeed, which I now realize is quite unhealthy. But so at the time, though, for those first few years, we were in that early growth stage that it wasn't really a problem. As we started to grow and split out and stuff and things were changing, I started to feel that insecurity of, am I going to continue to be good? And as I started at new companies, I was like, will I actually still be good? Was I just good in this one environment? Am I going to suck in every other environment? Like maybe I'm not even good at my job. So I had a lot of those feelings. Also, in this time when I left this first company and I was interviewing at other companies, I ended up getting an interview for what was really my dream job. I talked about the other dream job, but it was really plan B. I had another company I really wanted to work for. And I ended up kind of landing in an impromptu sort of interview that I was not prepared for, and I bombed it.
Oof.
And I beat myself up over that for probably 5 years. It was hard for me to let go of that because I really wanted it so badly and I was so passionate and I didn't get it. And I never worked for that company.
What was the bomb? What blew up in the interview?
So I walked in thinking it was like a friendly chat. It was presented to me as so-and-so wants to meet you. They're going to be in insert neighboring city here. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, like I was on the high. I was kicking butt where I was, right? So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go in. Everyone loves me. They're going to hire me. And I didn't really prepare for this interview. I didn't even ask, like in retrospect, I didn't even ask this person, should I prepare anything? Like that would have been smart. Instead, I went in blind, decided to wing it because that had always worked for me. And it didn't work for me because the person who interviewed me, who was the director of North American sales at the time, started asking me a lot of technical questions that I probably should have known based on my degree, but I had not thought about in 3 years. And I just couldn't remember anything. I totally bombed it. I think at one point I guessed something that was just like, it was sad. It was like if I could have watched this as a fly on the wall, I would have been really uncomfortable. Like the British version of The Office, the first time you watch it, like how you feel, that would have been watching my interview with
Oh
this
God.
person. It was just
Yeah.
like, oh, just make it stop.
You'd been at DNA Genotech for about 3 years, and then you left to go to Sigma Aldrich. Why did you leave?
I left partly because I realized that no one knew who DNA Genotech was. And I wanted to get some bigger name companies on my resume. I was ambitious. I wanted to grow my career. And I remember when I was interviewing for this company, the one that I bombed, and I was mentioning where I was working, they were like, who? DNA who? Like they didn't really know who we were. And so that was eye opening for me because I realized, okay, I'm doing great here. But if I want to go work for some of these other really interesting companies, they don't know who I am. And so I decided to go see if I could create success somewhere else. So that it was intentionally leaving. The other thing was at that point, I had gotten married and moved cities, and there was a lot more opportunity for biotech in the city I was in. And I was going to be remote, which then no one was.
Yeah, no, that was not a thing.
So it would have been really difficult to stay at the company that I was at.
What challenges did you face?
I went from being in a startup to a multi-billion-dollar company. They hit 2 billion while I was there.
Mm.
And it was just really different. I no longer had the, I don't want to say control, the influence maybe that I had at the earlier company. And everything was very siloed. And I felt like I couldn't affect change. And the other part was, it was, I want to say what's called a catalog sales job, where it was a distributor. So we sold many, many, many products. And so I did find a way to be more strategic in terms of how I was going to hit my number. And that presented a new challenge that was fun. But overall, I didn't feel passionately about what I was selling, about what I was doing. Like the meaning wasn't really there for me. So that's why I didn't even last a year there. And then I was gone.
I'm curious if that made you think, is the brand name, the company, does it matter as much versus like where I belong? Or was that too soon for you to have those thoughts?
That I was not that self-aware. I just thought I want to sell technology that is meaningful for me, that I care about, that I feel passionately about. And I want to sell to customers that want to talk to me. That's what that job taught me, where I felt like I was bothering people by showing up in that job. And I was used to, at my previous job, people wanted to talk to me. So that was a rude awakening. The other thing I learned from going to that job was read your contract carefully, because I ended up going from 3 weeks vacation a year to 2 because I just assumed it would be the same. Again, it's like, one of my skills is not attention to detail. And so I skimmed it and I didn't even really notice. And so that was another thing I got to learn from being at that job.
Referenced your tenure being short there. You moved on to Roche Diagnostics. Why did you end up there?
So the company whose interview I bombed sold a technology called next-gen sequencing. It was in the genetics space. It was basically the technology that allowed us to sequence the human genome. And all of these advances we've made are because of this. It was really interesting because at that point in my career, this was blowing up and I was really excited about it. I wasn't able to go work there, but Roche had acquired a company who had this technology as well. So they were the first to develop it. And so I was excited about going and working. The job was specific for that technology. It was a specialist role for that specific technology across Canada. And I knew Roche was a very good brand name to have on your resume. Biggest biotech company in the world at that time, or one of. And so, yeah, I was excited about going to work there and see what kind of career I could carve out for myself.
What realities did you face once in seat?
Yeah, so this is a contentious one, but I loved the technology and I loved a lot of my coworkers. I did not love the environment. When I first started working there, I was reporting to the US team and I loved that team. The only woman I've ever reported to in the history of my career was in that job. She was our national sales manager. And then she had a technical counterpart, also a woman. And then the director was also a woman. And they were so inspiring. They were such badass women that I was just like, oh, I want to be on your team. Let me just mold me. But big companies and as reporting structures and things work. So I reported into the US for the first 5 months. And then they made the change that I was going to start reporting into the Canadian organization in the new year because I live in Canada. Makes sense. But in Canada, I was the only person who did what I did. And so no one really understood what I did or cared, maybe. And I really struggled to connect with my manager and to form a relationship with him. And I think I was thrown into his lap, to be honest. I'm not sure he really wanted me. So that probably didn't help. And
Yeah,
so
but isn't that his job to make it work?
arguably, yes. But trying to be empathetic, that was a really challenging relationship for me because I had never worked for someone who I didn't really feel like maybe they believed in me or they were that crazy about me. I got the vibe that I'm like, I don't know if this guy likes me. And so I really struggled to work in that environment. There was also just like a lot of gossip within the team and stuff. It was a bit toxic in that way.
Yeah.
And I don't thrive in that environment. Like a lot of people I think can hack it maybe better than I could. So I just felt really uncomfortable a lot of the time. And so that's why I left. It's one of those things where I thought back and I thought, if I had potentially had a different manager there or been on a different team, would I have maybe spent my whole career there? Because it's a huge company. There's lots of opportunity there. And the answer is maybe. I'll never know. But
Oh, you're the stat, right? That employees leave managers. In the case example here. Do you feel like the lack of relationship affected your output?
possibly, I still worked really hard. Truthfully, it's like that is just a thing
The
about me. Like,
self-starter in you?
yeah, we all have things that we're good at and that we're not. And for me, I always say I have no problem taking action. Bias for action is my jam. It could sometimes too much, but actually working hard and wanting to get a result and wanting to do well has never been a problem for me. So I still worked really hard right until the end. What ended up happening is I went on mat leave and then I didn't come back after mat leave. I was also traveling a lot with that job. And I thought, I'm not going to want to leave a little baby like 50% of the time overnight. So that was another driving force. But I was like 9 months pregnant. I remember sitting on an exercise ball trying to train these other people that were going to be taking over the position while I went on maternity leave. So uncomfortable, but I was like, I need to make sure they know. I need to make sure they understand that
Wow.
ridiculous. But yeah, I always wanted to put 110% in whatever I did, even if I was leaving or whatever.
Did you have that same manager throughout your, like, from the 5-month mark till the end?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You left Roche, you went to Spartan. You mentioned mat leave. You didn't come back. So then at what point, like, how old was your child when you
Mm.
started at Spartan? And how was it different being a parent, rather, and
Yeah.
in being in the workforce?
Yeah, no worries. So initially, I was going to take a year of mat leave because in Canada, you can. And what ended up happening is while I was on maternity leave, the founder of Spartan, who I'd worked with in the past, reached out to me to get my thoughts on sales and really, I think, see if I would go work for him. And so I was interested and I told him that I was. They really wanted me to start sooner. And so this was a thing that it was a tough one because part of me didn't want to leave my baby, but part of me was also wanting to think with my brain again. And so I ended up starting there in October, and which
And
was a little
you
sooner
had your baby
in May, June, July, August, September, October. So 5.5 months, which is probably a little sooner than I would have liked. But at the time, I was not great at advocating for myself. And I thought I have to do this. But in fact, I probably could have negotiated starting a little bit later. But I did negotiate a transition in where I would be at home a couple days and then in the office so that I could still be with my son. Really becoming a parent and having kids was very good for me in a lot of ways because prior to that, I was not always great with work-life balance. I was not very good with boundaries. As soon as I got that BlackBerry, which is the first thing I got, I'm like on my BlackBerry at the dinner table. And then I'm like, oh, I'm exhausted. I'm going to go have a bath. And then I'm on my BlackBerry in the bath. So not great for someone like me who got a lot of positive reinforcement from working. Now I have the chance to do it all the time. You better believe I'm going to do it.
Resonates so much. As soon
Yeah.
as email became accessible outside of the actual office, I was like, oh, I feel so worthwhile.
Yes.
Such a sickness.
Yes. I can just do so much.
Yeah.
And so having my first child made me realize that, okay, if I'm working all the time, I'm not doing stuff with them. Less so when he was an infant because they just sit there. But as he got older, I was like, no, I like this kid. And I have 3 kids now. But I do think that having kids is a big reason I started to create some semblance of boundaries in my life. I probably still traveled too much. I still probably said yes more often than I would advise my younger self to now. But at the time, it was like, have to do this. Like, I have no choice. I need to do this trip. And so that was really hard because I actually had a lot of guilt every time I left the kids with my now ex, actually, which probably, again, my overworking, I don't think helped that either. But I remember going on my first trip, would have been my youngest and my eldest was not even 1. And oh, I'm going to get emotional. I would go to Europe for 10 days.
Oh.
Too long. I was still nursing him. And I was like, it was just killing me to have to do this trip, but I did it. So I thought that's what the company needed. So that kind of attitude. And so anyways, having kids was still good in the sense that I think I was better than I would have been otherwise, but it still took me a while to really learn the lessons
Sure.
of putting myself first and putting my family first. Yeah.
When you were on that trip, were you pumping and doing all that, or?
Yeah, I think I was like pumping and dumping or whatever because I couldn't bring it
Of
back.
course, because it was a long trip, far away.
Yeah. And I remember so we were flying home from Amsterdam and we got on the airplane and the pilot came on. We're going to be delayed. And my colleague, who was our VP, turned to me and he just goes, please don't cry. Because he knew I was just like I was physically just craving my baby. I was like, I just want to get home. And so the idea of being delayed another 5 hours was just the worst news to me at that time.
You were at Spartan for
8.5.
8.5. What kept you there? What was different from the other experiences where your tenure was still significant, noteworthy, but quite different than 8 years? What kept you
Yeah.
there?
Equity for one. I joined Spartan. Spartan was early stages. And I joined with the promise that I was going to get to build out a team, which I had never gotten to do before. And so I came in and I was initially just also selling to customers and figuring out our sales process. I got to build out a team. I would say there was a few things. So one was continuous growth, where I was able to go from being an individual contributor, figuring out how to sell this new technology, building out a team and everything that goes along with that. Like just that, joining a senior leadership team. I did all of that while I was there.
Cool.
The second was I really believed in the mission of this company. I was like, we are going to save people's lives and this is going to be a big deal. We're going to change the world. And the third was I was like, when this happens, I'm going to get rich. Those were the 3 things.
Love it.
They did not happen. Oh, I still was able to grow to an extent. I was able to join a senior leadership team, which was huge for me, but it was very frustrating. I was the only woman on the team. I was, for most of the time there, the only director on the team. Everyone else was a VP or a C-level. I was running the function, but could not get that VP title, which just was obliterating my ego.
Yeah.
And
Why couldn't you get it? What was the reason you were told?
The reason I was told is you're just not there yet. You're not there yet. We need to see you be more strategic. The problem
What
was,
examples?
yeah, there wasn't really a path to that. And it's interesting because at the time, I felt like I was banging my head against the wall probably for 3 of those 8 years. I was just like, what do I need to do? And I was like Googling, what is strategic? Because I was like, I thought I knew, but maybe I don't.
Yeah.
Clearly, I don't know. Around this time in my career as well, I started to get a lot better at reflecting and gaining a lot of self-awareness. Partly, I think because this was so frustrating for me, it's like I had to. A lot of things I've done in my career were out of necessity. And when I looked back later, he was right. I wasn't really showing up as the VP that I could be.
Hmm.
At the time, I could not see it.
Of course.
And it had to do with all kinds of things. It had to do with the fact that I didn't really feel valued in that role, partly because of the title discrepancy and partly because of these things that I was just carrying so much importance to or attaching so much importance to. Partly because, yeah, I think I felt a little intimidated by the team and I needed to get over some of my own limiting beliefs. And partly because that stage of company wasn't really where I shine, which again, I didn't realize at the time. So it was a bunch of things. But as a consequence, like in looking back, I'm still doing a pretty good job. I think maybe if I'd had a different boss, he would have given me that title because I was running the function, like sales, marketing, sales ops. But this individual felt strongly that like I show a certain level of seniority before he was going to
Hmm.
allow me that title. In retrospect, I'm not sure he knew how to tell me how to get there. I don't think he was withholding that information.
Speaking
I
of
think it
being
was,
strategic.
yeah, I think it's actually really hard. It's one thing to get there yourself. It's a whole other level of understanding to explain it to someone else. And so I think with him, I mean, he founded this company. He was the CEO. I'm not sure he understood how to explain the path to VP to someone who still had some developing to do. And I don't think it was for a lack of want. In any case, after 8.5 years, there was also some things that I wasn't happy with in terms of the direction of the company at that point.
Sure.
And so it was a really hard decision for me to leave because I had a fair bit of, and when I say a fair bit, like not CEO level, but like for me, I had a fair number of options in the company. And I was like, man, if this thing makes it and I leave, also because DNA Genotech, I also had some equity in that company and I left and I didn't buy my shares and they exited. And so that left a bit of
You
a
kicked
best
yourself.
in my mouth because I had I had been a big part of their success, their early success. I had really helped to build the early customer base for that company. And so it hurt me that I didn't get anything out of it. And
Mhm.
so this time around, I was like, I'm not going to do this again. So that I think that's another reason I hung on for so long.
Mm.
And here's the kicker. When I left, I bought a bunch of my shares and then they went to zero. Oh,
You're like, why would I get this right?
I know. At that point, I'm just like, I just suck. But I did leave and I did land a VP role. So I left to go to a VP role because it finally hit me after 8.5 years. They are never going to make me a VP for whatever reason, like right or wrong. It doesn't even matter. Right. But I just had to come to the realization that I'm never going to be a VP here. If I'm going to be a VP, it's going to mean I'm going somewhere else. Am I willing to leave this
Yeah.
and leave it all behind? And I, again, had a lot of guilt because I had built this team from the ground up and I loved the people on my team that I had hired and helped develop. So that was hard to tell them, like, I'm leaving you. But at the end of the day, finally, I decided, okay, I'm going to look at some other opportunities. And so I ended up moving into a VP role at that point and was just like, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but I got to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get the VP role. This is at full script. You're in the seat. Is it everything you hoped it would be?
In some ways, yes, because this was a company that had product market fit, that had a great product. And I had to come in and basically like figure out the sales culture, scale the team, put the right processes in place to allow it to blow up. And so there was a lot of satisfaction I gained from that. That was fun.
Mm.
It was also chaotic being a scaling stage company.
Yes. Let's hear about the chaos. What?
Yeah. There's just always a lot happening in a company that's growing that quickly. So it meant that we were pivoting a lot or that things needed to happen really fast. Results needed to be seen quickly. Our goals were ambitious. And so it wasn't like, it wasn't a relaxing job. One thing was that we were growing quickly and they were going to be bringing in that. I don't want to get too into all the details of this person moved here and this person moved here, but they were going to be bringing in a new CRO.
Mm.
And I felt I could be that person
Getting
because
layered at the top. Yeah.
I had a really strong understanding of the business. I understood how all the commercial pieces work together. And I was like, this is my shot. I can do this. Whether I was right or wrong, I really felt strongly like, I can do this. This is my chance. And they were not going to give me that role
Were you
because they want
considered?
certainly not officially. The CEO, we had an honest conversation and he wanted someone who had taken a company to $1 billion. And I had not taken a company to $1 billion. So it's just, this is what we want. I had not done this. So it wasn't even a conversation. And could I have stayed? Was this an ego move? I don't know. It was one of those things that I felt frustrated. And I still would have maintained my VP position. And there was still a lot of growth to happen. But I think part of it too was the constant pressure was difficult. And I got pregnant with my third at the age of 40. And so I was like, I might just be too tired to keep doing this right now. Like, I might need something else that where I'm really steering the ship. Again, a big part of it was I wanted to sit with the C-levels.
Yeah.
And it became obvious to me that I wasn't going to do that in this position. I was going to be a VP, but because, again, big company, growing fast, lots of people, lots of layers of leadership, the C-level was its own level. And so even like when I was a director, I was sitting in the same room with the CEO, the CFO, the COO, whatever. But in this company, I wasn't as a VP just because of the different structure.
Sure.
And so for me, I was like, no, I want to be making the decisions. Like I want to be steering the ship. So
Mm.
opportunistically, I was headhunted around this time. I wasn't actually reaching out looking for opportunities, but a headhunter reached out to me asking me if I would consider an EVP job. And it's so funny because I say early in my career, I didn't understand corporate structure. I turned to my partner. I was like, EVP, is that better than SVP or worse? And he goes, it's higher. And I was like, ooh, I want that.
New goal.
And yeah, like that was my reasoning. And the compensation was attractive. I had also just been through a compensation negotiation that also left a sour taste in my mouth at Full Script. And so I was like, I want to go make more money and have a better title. So I decided to leave. It was a difficult decision for sure, but it was like the biggest driving force, truthfully, the biggest driving force for me was I wanted to drive the ship. I wanted to be in that position where I was able to decide the strategy and really have that influence, which again, in retrospect, like how much of that was actually my ego. I don't want to say I'm not embarrassed to admit it, but this is the part people don't say.
Hard.
It's like, I'm saying the quiet part out loud. It's like, I wanted the cooler title.
Yeah.
So everyone would think I was great.
Yep.
And so I ended up moving for a last time. And then that was my final corporate gig before I decided to eventually leave and then start my own
And
business.
that was Evidence Partners.
Evidence Partners. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we jump to that, any of your experiences up until this point feel perception versus reality, by the way? Think of that when I ask this question. Did any of it feel gender related? Did you feel like you were fighting an uphill battle because you were a female?
I would say things that I noticed in one company, I felt that it wasn't just that I was a female, but also just my style of communication, being that my background is sales. I'm more intuitive and relationship based and not necessarily hardcore data, which that part, I did develop that more as I grew up too. But I felt that was, I was viewed as someone maybe who wasn't as senior or intelligent because of that when it was not the truth.
Yeah.
And so I think that could be gender related only in that women tend to be more like that. Like we tend to be more collaborative. We tend to be more focused on communication. So whether that was specifically gender or it was what my gender meant.
Interesting.
The other thing I noticed was And I'm going to just say this, that I feel that women in executive roles are held to a higher standard
Absolutely.
than men are. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I observed, for example, two C-level executives, both probably not up for the task, and the woman is let go and the man is not. And I've seen things like this, and not even just places I've worked, but in my dealings with companies and various areas, but where I've seen over and over again that we expect women, yeah, we'll give you that exec seat after years and years and years of proving yourself, but you better be a unicorn. And we allow men a lot more leeway.
Yeah. I've seen a lot more mediocre men in the roles where the women are killing it. And God,
Oh,
if
yeah.
only I could have it that easy, right?
Yes. And I'll actually share a little anecdote with you where I remember being on a call. There were men and women on this call, and we were all senior people. And my partner was upstairs. And my partner made the comment to me. I'm sorry, I heard some of that call. I didn't mean to listen, but because I really noticed that you and so, this other woman, you are just like, your stuff, you're so strategic. You were like a level above all the men on that call.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what it takes to be a female executive, right? You need to be like a level above because otherwise you just don't get the opportunity to be in the room. The beautiful thing is all of my frustration fueled my desire to build a business.
Before we get into that, talk to me about evidence partners in that EVP role.
Mm.
And were there any frustrations that came from the title?
Yeah. So when I first started, it was a dream because I had a VP reporting to me and an SVP, and that was it. And I was like, oh, girl, you have made it. This is the dream. And then about 6 weeks in, my VP quit,
Mm.
who was running the entire sales org. And so suddenly I had all these people, all these like sales reps that had no one to report to. And so it basically all blew up on me. And I ended up having to really get in the weeds and do a lot of figuring it out and firefighting and trying to hire a new executive. And so it went from at the beginning, this was the best decision ever, to 6 months in, what on earth have I done?
Mm.
So I was only there for a year. It was a hard year. It was a hard year for me. I loved the exec team, truthfully, really good humans and enjoyed working with them and worked with a lot of really smart people. And so I really appreciated that. And I felt valued as part of that team, which was really important to me. But the rest is really hard. And you know what? Part of me was like, I just don't know if the fight is in me. There was just frustration. Every company has its frustrations. At this particular company, there was frustration just with like administration and processes that were longer and more involved than I would like. I'm a person that, like, if you want to make me cry, hand me a contract to review. I don't like paperwork. That stuff, I don't do well there. And so anything that had to do with, oh no, I have to have a like meeting with compliance, I would just be like, that's it.
Yes.
Can't do it. Can't do it anymore. So there was a lot of that stuff in the job that maybe I hadn't realized would be part of the job. But truthfully, in that time before I left, I just burnt out.
Mm.
Finally, after years and years and years of doing way too much, not having good boundaries, saying yes, that was the time that it all culminated. And probably also the stress of that year with having my VP quit and all of that stuff. And I had a baby and we moved. It's just like all of the things, right? All of life, just like it was the perfect storm. And yeah, I burnt out. And burnt out was a thing that I thought had happened to me before. And I realized at this point, it had never happened to me before.
Low grade burnout. This is high
Low
grade.
grade. It was like, I need to go to Mexico for a week. Oh, now I'm better.
Yeah.
This was different. This was
Yeah.
like fragile and breaking down like every day. Just not myself, like not myself. And I was pulling it together for work. But then outside of work, I was just falling apart. And I'm like, something needs to change in my life. I cannot continue in life this way. My partner's going to leave me. He wasn't going to, but at the time, this is what I thought. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm such a mess. I can't do anything. Like I don't feel happy. It was so interesting because I was like, my life is perfect and I am miserable. I've got a perfect job. I've got a big, beautiful house, which by the way, we've since sold. That was also the wrong decision. Got a big, beautiful house on a lake. I've got this beautiful family. I'm
You
with
have
my
it
partner.
all. Yeah.
I had it all, right? And I was so miserable.
Mm.
So that was like, that was a really hard thing. Also because I felt like I should feel grateful for everything I had, but instead I felt like I felt unhappy. And I was really lucky at that point. I was in a peer group for sales leaders that I had joined through an accelerator program, which I had never had in my life. And man, anyone who listens to this podcast, if you don't have a peer group, get a peer group. It is the best thing you can have, like just this group of people to support you and who you can share with in a vulnerable way and who can lift you up and all of that stuff. So I was in this group with these guys and I showed up at one of our meetings and I pretty much had a breakdown. They were like, and Katie, share your update. And I was just like, I'm like sharing all this stuff. They're like, holy shit. I know what we're talking about today.
I have to double click on this. You said with guys.
It was all guys.
Yeah. Amazing.
There was one other woman in the group. I don't think she was even there at that point because she had a baby. So it was all guys. These guys were amazing. They will always
Terrific.
hold like such a special place in my heart
Mm.
because they just held space for me. And they were like, Katie, you need to take time off work, not an afternoon. They're like, you
Yeah.
need to take a week off and think about what you want in life. You need to spend some time and it was just like, you wouldn't expect it. Like these sales guys, they're all like high achiever, like super, super cool. But yeah, they just gave me exactly what I needed in that moment.
Mhm.
And so that was like a turning point. That was one of those things that happen in your life where my partner was trying to support me, but I think in a way he was confused. He was like, this is what you've always wanted. Why aren't you happy?
Yeah.
And he's, is it me? And so it was probably harder for him to support me the way I needed, where these people were at arm's length. They were my peer group, but they weren't in my life. They were able to really see, okay, this is what you need to do. And so I did. I took time off. I joined this 2-day mastermind about finding your purpose or something, which was again serendipitous. I hadn't planned to. My best friend she had gone through this coaching program. She's like, you can join this masterclass thing for free. You should do it. And I was doing it because I thought, well, I guess learning some coaching stuff will make me a better leader. And also because she had offered it, I felt like I should say yes.
Mm.
But at the time I was like, can I even carve out time for this? I don't even know if I want to do this. And that was another thing that was life-changing for me because I did this thing for 2 days and I didn't know what it was all about. I thought it was learning how to coach your team better. It wasn't. It was like discovering what you want in life. And so by the end of that 2 days, I was like, I think I'm going to quit my job.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So it was like the burnout was like a big piece of it.
Mm.
And then the second part was like, I had never really stopped to be like, what happens once I got always been trying to become a VP. And I'd never thought about, okay, what happens when I actually get there?
Now that I've checked the box, what? Yeah.
Yeah. So
That relatable.
it was a really tumultuous year.
Mm.
And like, it was really difficult in a lot of ways. Like I felt like I grew a ton, but went through a lot too. And really grappling like with what is my identity? Because I had attached a lot of women become moms and then their whole identity is being a mom. That wasn't me. Okay. For me, it was my career.
Yeah.
My career was my identity. It was so much of what I attached my worthiness to.
Mm.
And so I'm like, if I leave this, who am I? Who's even going to care about me? Am I even, again, saying the quiet stuff out loud, but I'm like, am I even going to matter? Will I even be significant in the world if I leave this job? And at that time, that was one of the scariest parts to me. It was all, and at that time, finally, for the first time in my life, I had connected with what your ego really is. And so I knew that this was an ego-based fear that was holding me back, but it was still real. I was still
Yeah.
like, I still want to be
But I
important.
mean, so what? We paint the ego as being so bad and not being able to don't talk about it, don't look at it, don't think about it. But the fact of the matter is, if you do it in a healthy way, if you foster
100%.
that ego, you're aware of the ego, you take care of the ego, then all of a sudden the ego can bring good for you and others, right? But it's
Absolutely. Yes. Now I see the ego as it tells me something's up.
mm,
I'm like, this is hitting a fear. This is something I should unpack. Before I was just like, this doesn't feel good. I need to go in this other direction or stop doing this. Whereas
put it
like
in the
now,
closet, stuff
yeah,
it.
get back under the bed. I
Yes.
would see you. Yeah.
So talk to me about your business, what you're doing today. You created a company, Insights to Action, coaching and consulting. Talk to me about that.
Mm. Yeah. So once I decided to leave my corporate job, I was like, now what am I going to do? And I had thought about doing coaching a couple times before, but it felt really scary. I didn't like the idea of having to find clients. That felt scary, even though I have whole backgrounds in sales. But I was like, oh, I don't want to have to do that.
Different. It's
Yeah,
vulnerable.
it
Yeah.
is both, especially when it's your own business. It's vulnerable. And I just thought that's not my path. I'm not going to go become a certified coach now and not do anything for a year, which is what I thought you had to do. Not true. Once I decided I was going to leave, I had now done this masterclass, 2-day masterclass, where I was introduced to this specific coaching academy. Like they were the ones that ran it. The founder ran it. She's so lovely. And I was actually like in that masterclass, I'm like, I want some of that energy. I'm like, I want what she's putting down. Like she just seemed so centered and like she knew who she was and what she wanted. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I ever want that? So that's partly what attracted me to doing a coaching certification through them. Part of it was just for me. I was like, I just want some of this zen.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do that. I also decided to start a company where initially I actually thought a big part of that company was going to be facilitating leadership teams, helping with company strategy, business strategy, sales strategy, and then I would do some executive coaching for sales leaders. That's what I thought my plan was going to be. And so one of the things I did is I took a quarter that I was winding down my corporate job and also starting to think about my business and plan my business. And ended up getting COVID and I was like in bed for 10 days and I built my website on Squarespace. So I had time.
It's beautiful.
I learned pretty quickly that I didn't care about advising on strategy and sales. And it was partly that I was going through this coaching certification. I was getting to know myself in a way I never had in my entire life. And I was also building my business, which when you build a business, you also learn way more about yourself than you ever have in your life. Like doing both of these things at the same time. I'm surprised my head didn't blow right off my shoulders. It's just was like so much insight. Don't think I was ready. But I also agreed to I signed up for a contract to do sales advising for founders, like early stage founders and a local accelerator. And so I was getting an opportunity to do that pretty regularly. And pretty quickly, I was like, okay, these women I'm working with are energizing me. All this other stuff, I don't care about it. Yeah, I would see it in my calendar and I'd be like, ugh, another one of these. Or, oh, this person wants me to figure out sales training for them. And I'm like, I shouldn't feel that. So pretty quickly I was like, why do I feel this way? Which again, I can credit like the hours and hours and hours of coach training and stuff that I did where you learn it for yourself before you learn how to coach other people. So I was a lot more self-aware than I had ever been and in tune with like my own energy of my body and stuff. So I did the sales advising. I stuck it out for that calendar year because I felt like I should, but I probably knew halfway through the year, I'm not going to keep doing this. And the other thing I started doing as I was building my business is I started posting on LinkedIn for the first time in my life. Super freaking scary because I was very shy growing up. I had never posted a single like personal type thing. I didn't consider myself a writer. I always assumed I was like sucked at writing because I was a science kid. Like the stories we tell ourselves, right? I'm like, I'm not a good writer. I'm a math person. I only like numbers. Like I just always said that.
Like you even have to be a novelist, right? To be able to
Or,
post.
or why can't you like both? Right.
Right.
But in February, I decided I'm going to start posting because I need to find clients somehow. And I just started posting. I started posting at the end of January, but it was only because I had written some content in advance, and I'm like, oh, it's sitting here. I might as well start posting. It wasn't even strategic. But then when I announced my business on April 1 of last year, immediately I had some people contact me to be like, hey, we want you to coach us. And so I was able to start working with a handful of clients relatively early in my business. I was doing some sales advising, I was coaching some sort of corporate clients, and then I was coaching some private clients. And so pretty quickly, both through the posting and realizing what I cared about writing about, like I didn't really care about writing posts about how to hire the next great sales rep. Like I would do it. I was like, yeah, this is helpful, but it didn't get me fired up. Whereas when I posted about the gender gap in leadership or women in negotiation or whatever, then I would get fired up.
Mm.
And people seem to also get fired up. And so I'm like, I think I want to follow this a little bit more. So pretty quickly in my business, I pivoted to saying, okay, no, I'm only going to work with women. I'm going to work with women who want to be leaders or who are leaders who maybe aren't showing up as the leader they want to be. So that was the two areas I really wanted to focus on, partly because my struggle to VP was so challenging for me. It's one of those things I look back now and I'm like, yeah, that was the most frustrating time. At the time, if you had said, I'll wave a magic wand and take you out of this situation, I would have been like, sign me up. But in retrospect, it taught me a lot of the stuff that now I use in my business to help other people not have to go through that.
If you could go back and talk to your sub 20-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I guess the one thing I would say is don't be so hard on yourself, which, by the way, I still say to my 44-year-old self. But I beat myself up for everything for a lot of years.
We'll jump into some rapid fire questions.
Fire.
How do you define success?
Doing something you love and feeling like you can be your authentic self
Mm.
in what you do.
What was your dream job as a young child?
So my mother tells me that when I was 3, she bought me matching underwear and undershirts. And I was so excited because I said, now I can be a ballerina like on the television. So I guess at a very young age, I wanted to be a dancer.
What's your path not taken?
I'm a person who loves a lot of things. I've changed my mind so many times. At one point, I wanted to, in university, I was like, maybe I'll drop out of school again and be a personal trainer. I really love health. I love living a healthy lifestyle. I focus on it a lot. And so that was something that a couple of times I was like, do I pursue this in some way? And I never have.
What 3 words would you use to describe your career?
Bumpy, enlightening, and the third B. Ooh, that's a freaking hard question. I don't know. Fun?
What word drives you crazy?
Literally. When used improperly.
The word literally?
The word literally when used improperly, because people now use literally to mean
Literally
the opposite of
anything.
literally. They use it to mean the literal opposite of literally. I know that language changes. And now I believe if you look up literally in the dictionary, it lists both the correct definition and the opposite, because that's how people use it now as slang.
What is the company on your resume that turns the most heads?
Probably Full Script.
I'd like you to label 3 of your jobs. Love, ultimate fun, skip.
Okay. Love is what I do now. I love my business so freaking much. Ultimate fun was probably DNA Genotech early days. Oh, that was just so damn much fun. Skip, which to choose? Sigma.
I'm thrilled that you gave me the time and that you shared your story. I know that many people will identify based on their own experience. So thank you for sharing openly.
As soon as I saw the title, I was like, oh, I'm going to be on this podcast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reiner. If you enjoyed today's episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to listen to podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.